The Ace Man, Adam Carolla, joins us today. He has a brand new book out tour. I believe it's available right now. You don't have to pre-order or anything. AdamCarolla.com. A couple people had copies out Saturday. They were showing me. Everything reminds me of something, advice, answers, but no apologies. The great Adam Carolla, been a fan of his for a long time. Just kind of a pioneer in radio in 100 different ways. Loveline, show that impacted millions of people. Adam Carolla's show he was on in mornings. Then he had switched to the biggest podcast of all time for a while. There's all kinds of fun stuff. He's got a new book. He's going to be on the show right now. It's the Chad Dukes Show. Good looking Monday out there to you, everybody. So excited. Joining me on the Monk's Barbecue Hotline. Gentleman knows a thing or three about barbecue himself. Got a brand new book out called Everything Reminds Me of Something, Advice, Answers, but No Apologies. The raconteur of our generation, Mr. Adam Carolla, is with me on the program. Ace, always great to have you. How are you, my friend?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
I know you don't remember any of this, but when WHFS flipped formats, you guys had just cut liners for a show I was doing. We were doing weekends at the time, and it was called the Big O and Duke Show. And on the show, you and Drew called us Big Orgasm and Duke. And that followed me for a long time. And then one time you came on Big O and Dukes, and we were on KZON in Phoenix, and you said that we had been fired in so many cities around the country that it formed a swastika, which was hilarious. And then you and I actually did a radio show from the Horse and Hound in Tempe when you were the morning show on that particular franchise. So I know you don't remember me, but I remember you, and you've always been very good to all my radio shows. So thank you again for coming on.
I remember the Horse and Hound, and I do remember that day, like going down and getting, I don't know, barbecue or drinks or something and doing a live thing. I do remember that for sure.
Well, it's great to hear. I'm a big fan of your podcast, the books, everything, all of your spoken word stuff. I hope that maybe Mangria distribution can get a little bit more, I don't know, varied, I would say, in the Washington, D.C. area. It is a bit of a chore at this point, but that's my biggest criticism. The new book, I've tried to tell people about all your books and about how you say things, and then you've chronicled this on your show. They happen, and they seem to be happening quicker than we normally thought that they would. Is it common sense? Is it the fact that you come from like a blue collar background where you're interacting with people that a lot of other personalities wouldn't? Like, how did you become this soothsayer?
I've never been a reader, just because I couldn't read when I was younger, and I just kind of carried that into my adult life. So I've never really ingested other people's thoughts as much as I've sat alone with my own thoughts. And I think part of the problem, and I guess if you just brought it to current events, like you just said, COVID, a lot of people just sort of sat in front of the TV set and opened the USA Today, and they kind of ingested thoughts, current wisdom and current thoughts. And I sort of sat back and was kind of looking at it just through my own lens. And I was coming up with different conclusions and different ideas than CNN wanted me to have, or USA Today wanted me to have, or the LA Times wanted me to have. So I guess the first part of the equation is not really sitting in the bouillabaisse of the media and the cycles and kind of what they want you to think. And I'm not even talking about a conspiracy theory. I just mean a kind of a populist thinking, but just kind of a more outsider kind of, I'm going to sit back and ruminate and form my own thoughts on whatever the subject at hand is. And you will begin your journey on sort of coming up with thoughts that are different, and then ultimately probably being ahead of the curve on a lot of thoughts.
The book is out. You can go to AdamCarolla.com. Of course, social media at Adam Carolla on Twitter and Instagram. Grab a link, pick it up. In 50 years, we'll all be chicks was 100% correct. Unfortunately, anything other than the date, it was more like in 5 years. I wanted to ask you about that and about Top Gun and the fact that Top Gun just beat the Avengers. this terminalist show that Chris Pratt put on, the critics savaged it. It's toxic masculinity. It's pro-military, blah, 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 blah. The audience loves it. It's the top show on Amazon. And you talked about this with the UFC. I remember listening on your podcast and the pushback kind of against how soft everything has become. Do you think, is there some hope at the end of the tunnel where there's these entertainment ventures that aren't, the garbage, The Voice, The Masked Singer, all this crap that we're just seeing constantly on network television? Do you see some of that pushback starting to actually happen?
Well, if you're going to push too hard in one direction, you're going to get some pushback in the other direction. And, that's the kind of society we're living in right now. So if you're going to try to push people into electric cars, you're going to see more Jeeps with lift kits and gun racks and stuff on it, And if you're going to push people too hard to go to safe spaces, you're going to see more jujitsu academies open up on the corner, sure. Right? So we're just kind of, every time a president comes in and makes the announcement that he's going to, cut back on large magazines and he's going to put a ban on assault rifles and stuff, the sales go through the roof, right? So we do have a kind of half of society that goes for the ride, and then the other half goes, you're not going to get my Jeep and you're not going to get my AK-47 out of my cold dead hands, So you can kind of figure out where things are going sometimes by how hard people are pushing in one direction. So when they're pushing us all to watch drag show academy or whatever the hell, trans, whatever thing that's on every network, if they're pushing too hard, something's going to spring up to fill the void. It's kind of like if all the late night show guys are going to go woke, then that's going to create a Gutfeld on Fox. That's
sure.
Just how our society works.
Adam Carolla joins us on the Chad Duke Show. One of there's several pieces of advice you've given out over the years that I've kind of tried to apply in my own life because they're solid advice. And one of them was you were talking about your son, and you were saying, I don't want him to be too into X, Y, and Z. I want him to create his own things, like being too into Star Wars or too into Marvel. It's like, well, create your own Marvel. And this was 10 years ago, I hear you say this. And now, if you look at how many podcasts are about, oh, look, we'll dissect the new Halloween trailer, or look at these tweets, let's put them together on a blog page and talk about what other people are saying. It is crazy to me how much content there is out there of just analyzing other people's content. And maybe it's naive because, I like football. I watch people talk about football my whole life. Maybe it's the same thing, but there are so many people that are so famous online for just talking about crap that other people have created, and that's something I feel like you've always kind of warned against maybe getting too into.
Yeah, I don't, it doesn't feel like, there's a difference between being an art critic and being an artist and being a movie critic and being a director, and, you can get paid doing both jobs, but I don't think people, I don't think young kids sit around and dream of being an art critic or a music critic. They dream of being in a band. And so I would say try being in a band before you start thinking about critiquing other people's music. On the other hand, it's a lot easier to sit back and critique other people's work than it is to, create your own.
It certainly is. I know you got a car coming. I don't want to keep you all afternoon. How have you been able to, so many people, how have you been able to stay funny? Because you've been drawn into this conflict, whatever it is. I see the tweets. I see what people write about you at times. And anytime I listen to your shows or I read your books or I watch you do an interview, wherever, you're still funny. We're so many of these guys that were funny, they're not. They've abandoned the humor to wade into the trenches and we're fighting fascists and blah, 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 blah. I assume it's not conscious. It's just who you are. But it is disheartening when somebody you admire and you enjoy their work, if they differ from you politically, they say, well, I don't want you listening to any of my music. It's like, well, Jesus Christ, I can't buy your record or I can't watch your TV show because we don't vote the same way. Like, how have you been able to keep the humor in this throughout the course of what we're going through as a society?
Well, it's you got to kind of dance with who brung you. You know that I made my bones doing comedy. It's still a love of mine. You evolve, you mature, you have kids, you have pay taxes. You have different thoughts. Comedically, but I've always thought like A, it's your job, and then B, it's kind of in you, and then C, you have an ability, which is you have a sense of humor. It's not something that everyone has. Why squander it by going all Mark Ruffalo on every subject? You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
you have this. It's like, I don't know. You're great. You're a great barbecuer, and you go vegan. It's like, oh, well, you had this ability, you had this gift, you had this thing, and now you've decided to put it up on a shelf. And my feeling on that was like, this is what you do, so let's keep doing it. You can editorialize, you can work in other ideas, but let's not lose sight of the fact that you have this ability, and you shouldn't be squandering it.
Last thing for you, the 24-Hour War, tremendous documentary. I wish more people that weren't into cars would check it out. Did you know Ford versus Ferrari was just going to come out a year and a half later and use the same material? I'm sure you've answered this question 1,000 times, but the timing of that always seemed very curious to me, that you had been working on that project for so long, and I learned everything about that time and period in between, that ramp up between those two companies, and then a Brad Pitt movie comes out. How did that all unfold?
Well, the Brad Pitt movie's coming out. I think it's an F1 thing. It's the other one was the Matt Damon, Christian Bale.
Oh, that's
movie.
it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah, I know you know that.
Yeah, of course.
But your listeners,
Sure, of course. They're morons, not me.
They don't know what you're thinking.
Of course not.
It was a story that I thought was pretty compelling, and I was just a couple years ahead of the game, and so I wanted to make this movie just based on how compelling the story was. Yeah. And I made the movie, and then a year and a half later, they made the feature of it based on how compelling the movie was.
Sure.
Maybe they saw my doc. I don't know if that helped them make their decision in any way. I have no way to verify that. Sometimes when things get into the zeitgeist, it helps, But it was just an example of, here's a really good idea. I want to make a documentary about it, and I turned out to be right.
Yeah.
It was a really good idea.
I would never tell you your business, sir, but a couple years ahead of the game sounds like a great book project for you, where you just list everything you've predicted, because that could fill 300 pages. AdamCarolla.com is the website. New book out. Everything reminds me of something. Check it out. Going to be hilarious and informative. Of course, AdamCarolla.com. Ace Man, thank you so much for the time, brother. I always appreciate it.
Thanks, Chad.
Of course. Great Adam Carolla, everybody, on the Chad Duke Show.